2005 Honda Stepwgn. It's been dropped off with a big list of things they want doing to it. They want front discs and pads replacing, they want rear discs and pads replacing, engine servicing, and a general once over. So let's get started. I generally avoid imports because they can be a complete crotch pheasant to get parts for, but we certain long-standing customers you can't really say no, so better get on with it. A nice chunky suspension in it. Oh. Your salt ratchet. Look what we're dealing with here. Yeah, I suppose they are kind of lipped. So I'd probably have gone a little bit further, but you know, it's their vehicle, and if they want it all changing, then that's their call. They're going to have some dramas at MOT soon. I'll tell them about that bush. It's still in one piece, but it's cracking, so that'll be an advisory. Let's get some blocks under it and off we go. Timber's under something nice and structural. There's always a debate over using axle stands, jack stands, and this, that and the other, and if I'm doing something like a clutch, then I will get the vehicle up in the air and I'll usually seat it onto the big axle stands. But if I'm doing something like this, I tend to leave it on the jack and then put just a secondary catch underneath it, something like blocks of timber or, you know, a smaller stand. I mean, we have these blocks of timber, for instance. They were originally taller than that, and they were used to support a 100-ton motor. So timber is a really remarkably useful thing if you're packing something or supporting something, because it tends to shape to whatever you are lifting with it, and providing you go across the grain or you support something flat, it acts both as a damper and a brake and a support. So it's a really effective thing. If you have a car land or you need it to not slide or fall, it's actually quite good because it acts as something as a no damage support and also as a brake. And again, if we have any yards or anything like that where we need to support something heavy, then it's remarkably useful. So just a little bit of insight. Of course, this is a Japanese car, so they avoid 13mm. So the brake slide pin screws will always be 14 or 12. That slide pin moves, that's a good sign. We won't back that out altogether because it'll help deal with the torque reaction when you hit the bottom one. So. One of the main enemies when you're doing a Honda of this era, especially one that's a grey import from Japan, is rust. either really good or really bad. I'll just set that caliper up there for now. And other than a bit on the edge here, it doesn't look too bad. I'm pretty sure I heard some knocking when I pulled this onto the drive, so I'll go over all of the suspension joints and make sure it's all good. So this is one of the other areas you get a lot of rust, which is these spring plates that are designed to sit between the end of the pad and the caliper carrier, caliper bracket. They end up rusting into place, so they should have a bit of spring and bounce in them, but they're completely stuck. So what tends to happen is you get a bit of rust on the end of there, and you get a bit of rust inside here in the actual gap. And this is one of those situations where there's always a debate about using lubricants on the end of brake pads, and basically anyone that says you put them together dry is just wrong, because this happens. Don't use lubricants willy-nilly. You know, not all copper slips are created the same, not all ceramic greases are created the same. This is a high temperature copper slip that's actually designed for brakes. It is specifically brake plate lubricant, and it's magic. If you put a very thin sparing coating on both the internal side and the external side and the end of the pad, you'll go through the entire life of the pad and you won't have this, it won't seize, it won't cause problems. We'll have a look at the slide pins, because obviously these are single cylinder calipers, so as the brake pads wear, the caliper has to move backwards, and the problem you get on a lot of Hondas is the brake pins seize, so the lubricant dries out and they rust, and then what happens is it burns away the outside pad when they get tight, because it doesn't allow the caliper to slide back. So it does that to a point where they seize completely, where it stops using the outside pad, the disc starts to rust quite badly, and then the inside edge burns away. And obviously it's quite difficult to see the inside edge, but the annual test in the UK is incredibly stringent. So one of the things is, if your brake pad has less than 3mm on it, it's an advise, and if it has less than 1.5mm on it, it's an automatic fail. So it's at the end of its life, but depending on how many miles someone does, there's probably another year there. I touched on how hard these are to get parts for, so we'll just have a look and make sure that the pads are right. So that one's got the wear spring on. They look pretty good. That's a very good start. Have a quick scoob at the disc and see if that looks about right. Because normally in Britain I can give the registration number of a car and I will immediately get a huge list of parts. It'll be almost everything that's on it, and with a little bit of fiddling around you can get to a situation where you can get down to the exact parts. Occasionally you might have a choice of two, and with the big factors on sale or return, it's not a bother to get both types. So that is the same diameter, so it looks like we can call that a win. Right, we'll get on and change these then. There's always contention around letting brake calipers hang on hydraulic hoses, and yes, it's good practice to not let them hang on the hose, but it's only a good practice thing. In days gone by, flexible hoses were not necessarily very good, but modern flexible hoses, the pressures that they put up with and the the tensile strengths they're tested to. If you drop the caliper on the hose for 10 feet, you might inconvenience it. But realistically, these are so strong now. The pipes are so strong, and the ends are so tough. The ferrules are so tough that you could hang it all day, even a big caliper, and it wouldn't be a problem. It doesn't mean you should, but it's not a concern. So when you see mechanics doing it, it really doesn't matter. It's always something for the armchair and Facebook specialists to scream about, but no one gives a shit about them. And we're back. So, pop this on here. Put the bracket back on. Again, I'm fairly sure I can hear him knocking, but what or where? Oh, it's in the anti-roll bar, okay. So, you need some anti-roll bar drop links. These two ball joints have got movement in them, and again, the rules are quite strict here. Your annual test, all the suspension components are checked, and you can't have more than like detectable play. If there's movement in them, then it's a fail, and it's one of the reasons why if you drive somewhere in the United States, you'll often see vehicles at the side of the road with ball joints popped out and this kind of thing, and it's borderline unheard of here. So give us a bit of a wipe. Just going to have a look in that gap and make sure that as we spin the disc it runs clear. You can check it with a dial gauge, but I guarantee that the only time anyone ever does is if they're being scrutinised. Generally, if you get something trapped behind the mounting surface, it doesn't create a small out of true, it creates a very, very big one. And there's almost nothing that you can do to correct a small out of true, and it generally doesn't affect the brakes, but it's good practice to just give the disc a spin and use a gap like this as reference, and if the gap doesn't change like this one didn't, then that's due diligence. You're relatively confident that it's all right. If it's a gigantic disc, I mean aircraft brakes or something, there'll be much tighter standards, but these never have to endure anything like that level of braking, level of heat. But give them the best chance they've got. So, generally speaking, where wear indicators are not used, they use a passive thing. They use a spring, which when the pad wears back to the point where this touches the disc, it screeches and it irritates you into changing the brakes, change the brake pads, which is it's a reasonable idea. But you get some people that are so oblivious they just keep driving until the squeal is gone and the metal back plate hits the disc. So we'll just, before we put some lubricant on it, we'll just see how well they fit. Yep, they're nice, and the amount of rust removed from the bracket means that these fit really well, so we don't need to do any shaping or anything on them. We'll put a little bit of brake plate lubricant just on the very tips, just to give it the best chance that it's got. You don't specifically need a wind back tool for front calipers because they don't have the handbrake mechanism on them, but what this does give you is a nice specific device for pushing the pistons back in. The caliper moves really nicely as well. It's in pretty good condition. There seems to be no middle ground. The Honda calipers either last forever or they're crap. I know of quite a few like high mileage Hondas from the early 2000s, and they're no problem. And then there's some Accords where I've had to put front calipers, rear calipers on them, and all sorts. I mean, I think this has got separate handbrake shoes rather than the mechanism on the back of the caliper. They're torqued up. This is all. Let's go so that can go back on. I get asked a lot, where did you learn this, etc. I'm not a mechanic. I'm an engineer. I started off in entertainment and special effects, specialised in big compressed air cam and this kind of thing, and then moved into the field I'm in at the minute, which is basically very, very large electric motors and power converters. There's a lot of electrical and mechanical involved, but I can't go into detail because of the nature of the work. I always used to sell my spare time for engineering works. It was usually either metalwork and fabrication or whatever would come up, but for the last sort of 15 years I've had a continuous queue of car repair work because people have either had bad jobs done by garages or the garages couldn't fix the fault, and so more and more people have come here. Word of mouth has occurred, and then people have started saying, oh, we'd like to see it, could you could live stream it, you could do this, that and the other, and so we shall experiment and record a few, and if it gives people confidence to do things themselves, then happy days. I don't really care for people's opinions. If someone's got something constructive to say or if they're interested, I'll help them, or I'm willing to hear it, but I haven't got time for anyone that's got an attitude problem or the armchair mechanics that haven't a clue. There's that joint down there has got a knock in it, so he's going to need that before he gets the annual test, so I'll tell him about that. Whether you can buy that specific link, but hopefully it's the same as another Honda vehicle. I shall do some digging and try and find out. I need to change the brake fluid on this as well, but we will cross that bridge when we come to it. So I will change the brake on the other side, and then when I've done that we'll have a look at the brake fluid, the engine service and the rear brakes. So we're going to change the brake fluid on this. I'm going to change the contents of the tank first because I don't want to push any of this crud through. So the master cylinder is about a foot lower than the tank, so what I'll do is suck out the tank and put fresh fluid in it before I then push the fluid through the car. This looks really nasty. A bit in there and give it a swill. do this one the old-fashioned way, because none of my auto bleed kit lids fit this brake fluid reservoir. Press the pedal many times because I can't pressurise the tank. See how we are in the tank up here. Put a bit more in. There's nothing more irritating than doing this and then realising that you've run the tank dry, and then you have to bleed the whole thing. Drop a little bit into this pag oil container and see what the fluid looks like. Give it some more of this. You get a bit of flow with gravity through. So, oh yes, that's nice and clean now. So you get the gravity flow, so there's no chance of any backflow or any air entering when you have it done. So we'll just tighten this back up. We'll put that off there and let the excess out. Put some more fluid in because we're right way back up to the top. And return to it. This is a good thing to show really, because it shows that you don't actually need any special tools to do a brake fluid change. The special tools make the fluid change easier, definitely make it easier, but you can do it without too much drama. We have a nice clean, it's still a bit manky, we'll run a bit more through. We'll take it down to the minimum on the tank. It's pretty clean. Excuse the oil dripping off it, but the actual brake fluid is clean. Doing back up. Nip that off, drain the excess into the pan. Fill it back up before we forget. Obviously, when I do the back brakes in a bit, I will run fluid through the rears as well. Put the top back on. I've got to put the strainer back in later. I'm quite happy with how clean the inside of my brake fluid can is, so I'm not worried about having the strainer in while I fill it. Right. I don't know what spark plugs this uses, so I shall hoik one out when I go down to get some breakfast later. Now this is one of the 2 litre VTEC engines, so the oil filter is in a bore-like place up the back. Yes, it is. However, this has got a nice big wheel arch. I might be able to get in and get that through the side there. Happy days. what is wrong. So, because it certainly doesn't look like that. And that is absolutely, yeah, the one I've been supplied is a cylinder. This is nothing like. So, I reckon I've seen that filter on a British spec vehicle. So we'll take some photographs of that. What we will do is give it a bit of help and clean some of the crud out. Quite saturated, but so when was this made? Oh, 2010. So that's been in there a while. So yes, we will find the correct air cleaner. Right, onto the rear. Let's have a look. What we will do is, because this is a front wheel drive auto and I'm done with the front, we'll put it back into park. Quick shot. Try not to tread on the wind back tool because it takes a while to put them back in the right place. Let's get down and find somewhere to lift this up. What have we got under here? We've got some nice jacking points. Let's start by looking at the convenient jacking points. Cursed you for being a smaller 7 or 8 or something. Have a look. It is an 8mm. Question is it going to come undone or is it going to snap? It's currently Schrodinger's bleed nipple. Beautiful, it's going to come undone. Just nip it back up. Bleed pipe into the tank and pop that on there. No, you're not going to be awkward, are you? It's not going to fit. Bar steward. Not make too much of a mess. Again, gravity is letting a little bit flow, so we're not going to have a situation where any air flows back in. There's now a nice clean colour coming out. Yep. Even that one came undone. This is most unusual, but also most appreciated. I'll flush some fluid through there. Colour, that's looking right. Oh, that's nice and clear now. And there we go. Already kicked out the timbers, so back on the ground. Have a look at the brake fluid level, pop the little filter back in. Fill it right up, because, well, not right up, but up fairly high. So I now need to go and stomp the rear cylinder out all the way. Give it a bit of foot. Well, that's all we can do until we get some spark plugs. So, square up a little bit and go and try and find some spark plugs.